Hello and welcome to week 2. Remember the shapes that we used in Data Wrapper? Well, in this video we're going to look a little bit behind the scenes on those shapes and also talk about where to find them. For example, maybe you're not using Data Wrapper and you need those shapes to join to your data. Or maybe you are using Data Wrapper and Data Wrapper doesn't have what you need. For example, if you wanted to map data on the city council districts of Oakland, California, you would be out of luck. So we need to go find those shapes. So I just went to Google and Googled City of Oakland Open Data, and I got this page, and here it is, the Open Data portal for the City of Oakland, California. And up here, I want the City Council District, so City Council, City of Oakland Council Districts, that's what I want. All right, so I click on that, and here we have a few entries. This one says map on it, so I'm gonna go with that. Sounds about right. And sure enough, this is the shape data for the City of Oakland City Council districts. So what we have here, a lot of open data portals are kind of like this, and a lot of them have shape files in them and the ability to export them. So that's what we want. Over here, there's this export command, and I'm going to click on that. And this is actually really great because we can go through some of the different formats that are available and which ones I like and which ones I tend to avoid. So the first option here is the original format that it was created in by the agency that put this together. Usually don't want that one because I want one of the other ones usually, but it's good to know it's there. KML stands for Keyhole Markup Language. That's actually the precursor for Google Earth. It's a totally valid format. It works. A lot of the information in a KML, though, is also very centered around styles, and sometimes the pins and the borders and things are things that maybe I don't want those styles. So KML I tend to avoid. I use it if I need to, if it's the only thing around, but it's not here. We have others. So KMZ is actually just a zipped KML file, so that's good to know. And the shapefile is something that I use a lot. Let's go ahead and click on that, and that will download the shapefile into my downloads directory. And I want to show you that because it's a little bit of a misnomer, because the shapefile that I'm downloading is actually a zip file, and in the zip file are several files. So the shapefile, which we know by the SHP extension, so you can see this one has an SHP extension, is actually a collection of files. And that's just a good thing to know, that this SHP shapefile format has a bunch of files that all have to go together as part of the package. So let's go ahead and look at that. But the way we're going to do it is we're going to actually look at it just from the zip. And to do that, I'm going to go to mapshaper.org. This is the first time we'll look at MapShaper, and this is the web version of MapShaper. And so here we have our MapShaper window, and here's my downloads folder, and I can just drag that zip file containing all of those shapefile related things, and boom, there it is. That's the file, literally the shapefile for the City of Oakland Council Districts. And I can actually go over here to this little arrow on the right and say Inspect Features. This is super important because you can then hover over these different districts and see up in the upper left corner data that's associated with each of these shapes. And that's super important because when you need to join your data to shapes, you need to know what join keys you're going to be using. And so if I look around here, I can pretty quickly see, let's just look at this one first. This is City Council District 3, and we can see that in the corner. We see the city council member, we have an email address, the full name of this district. There's an ID number. A lot of these packages have just regular ID numbers for each shape. I don't think it's related to anything about this particular council district. It's just the 9th shape in this file. We have a link to that district. What else do we have? We have a name, a field called name, and it's CCD3. And if you look at the others, though, that looks like the identifier, right? CCD and then a number. So if we had data for city council districts that we wanted to map, we would need a column that contained these codes, these CCD3, CCD4, and that would allow us to join the data to these shapes. There aren't that many of them, so I could actually add a column and write them in. If there were 3,000 of them, that would be a little trickier. You'd really want a data set that already has the identifiers in it. And something else you might need to remember is the property name. And the property name in this case is, turns out, called name. It's not always that case. The other properties are like city council mem, an email, and full name. This one just happens to be name. And that also, that property name would be useful later on in week 4 when we do some joining. We'll need to know what that field is, that property is. Okay, another thing that's kind of cool about this MapShaper website is that I can export this. So I imported it as a shapefile, an SHP file, or an SHP zip file, really. And I can output it by clicking this export button in the corner and click on GeoJSON. That's the format I tend to use. It's the format I like. I could change the name if I wanted to, and I can just export it right here. So I'm going to export it, and it drops that into my downloads directory, which is great. I've just converted the file format, which you may need to do if you have a KML or if you have a shapefile and you want to go to GeoJSON. This is a great way to do it. If we go back to the City Council shapes from the City of Oakland, we can actually see that we could have downloaded a GeoJSON file. I'm just going to do that just because, why not? And so they give us a GeoJSON file, and that's useful. I keep talking about GeoJSON files. They just keep coming up all the time, and I find them to be super useful. It's also the file that you would need to upload to Data Wrapper if you wanted to add a new shape layer there. Remember, we didn't have Oakland, so we could upload this to Data Wrapper and then use it in Data Wrapper. It's also the format that we'll be using for Mapbox. So let's dive into what a GeoJSON file looks like, because you can look at them. They're just text files, but they're formatted in a very particular way. So I'm going to open my text editor here. This is the text editor that I use to code. And I'm just going to go into my downloads folder and drag that GeoJSON file in there, because we can look at it. It's in legible text. It's formatted in kind of a tricky way, but you can read it. I'm actually going to do something that my text editor allows me to do, which is to prettify it. It formats it in a way with indentations and allows me to look at this JSON file, this GeoJSON file, a little bit easier. And you can see right away that we have a category called features, and there's a whole list of features. The first one we can see here, and the properties for that feature are that's the thing we just were looking at, right? We see we have the email, we have the council member, we have a link, and we have a name. It's right here at the top, name, and that's CCD3. Okay, so the property title is name, and the property value is CCD3. Down below, super important, is the geometry part. And what this is actually a list of coordinates. Here are the coordinates that define that shape. These are longitudes and latitudes of points that are being used to draw this council district. And they go for a long time because there are lots of points that make up that shape. And that tells a software package or a mapping program how to draw that shape on the planet. And that's what a GeoJSON file is. Okay, let's look one more way at a GeoJSON file. I'm going to make a really simple one, and you can make one too. If you go to this website, geojson.io, you can actually make a GeoJSON file. Let me show you. So here's this map, and it's one of these slippy maps, so I can move it around, I can zoom in. I'm going to zoom in on the United States. That's because that's where I live. And this time I'm going to make, I want to make a little triangle over Nebraska. So let's do that. There's a little palette of shapes I can do, lines and squares and points, but I'm just going to make a little shape. And this allows me, it's a polygon tool, and so I can click here, and then I'm just going over here, and I'm going to click again, and then I go over here, and I click again, and I go back to where I started, and I click right back at that point, and suddenly I have a triangle on the Earth over Nebraska, and I have the GeoJSON that represents that triangle. And you can see it's got some, well, actually it has no properties, right? But the geometry, it's a type of polygon, and the coordinates are right here. And you can see they're the longitudes and latitudes of every point in this triangle. But there are 4 points. Triangles have 3 points. That's because the first point and the last point are the same. And it's because it's closing this loop. So we have a closed shape. This is a polygon, and it's drawn on the planet. It doesn't have any properties, as I said, but I could make some properties. I could say description. And I could say that is central Nebraska. Okay, and I could say, oh, what ID is that? That is John's ID number. That's my ID number, and I'm going to call that 1. All right, let's call it actually a string. Let's call it 01. Okay. So now it has properties, description, and John's ID number. And what's kind of neat about geojson.io is that I can actually save this GeoJSON file. Let's go ahead and do that. GeoJSON, save GeoJSON, and it's saving down here as map.geojson. So if we go back to MapShaper, reload this page to sort of clear out Oakland there. And I go to my downloads folder, there's map.geojson. I can drag it right in, and there we have this triangle. It's not on a map anywhere, but it is a triangle, and it is GeoJSON. And in fact, if I go again to the arrow and say inspect features, hover over the triangle, you can see up in the upper left corner, the description is Central Nebraska, and John's ID number, that field is set to 1 or 01. So that is the basis of a GeoJSON file, and really the basis of any geographic shape file, no matter what the format is. I hope that gives you a sense of what's inside these geographic files, so you have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on. You know, entire degrees are devoted to geospatial analysis and work to actually make these kinds of files. But fortunately, there are a lot of them out there on the internet. So if you are looking for them, often you can find them. Things to look for, of course, Googling the region or municipality that you're looking for, but along with that, keywords such as shapefile or GeoJSON or GIS, and that stands for Geographic Information Systems. So if you use those keywords along with the area you're looking for, sometimes you can find valid shapefiles and GeoJSON files you can use for your project. Okay, next time we're going to talk about mapping tips and tricks, some of the pitfalls to avoid, and other things to consider as you are making your maps.